In a hall of flashing blades, a tomb guard is ridiculed for his ceremonial stillness. An arrogant champion mocks his slow-motion ballet. But when the duel begins, one perfect, silent touch will shatter everyone's reality. The air inside the Blade Point Fencing Academy tasted of electricity. It was a clean, sharp scent, a mixture of ozone from the scoring machines, the faint, tangy aroma of sweat, and the underlying hint of floor wax on polished hardwood. It was a space dedicated to motion, a cathedral of controlled violence where every sound was sharp and deliberate, the rhythmic squeak of rubber-soled shoes, the soft whoosh of a practice lunge slicing through the air, and the sharp, metallic kiss of blades meeting in a flurry of parries and ripostes. Light, cold and white from overhead track lighting, gleamed off the silver mesh of masks and the pristine white of the uniforms, turning the athletes into anonymous, predatory insects. In a corner, far from the main fencing strips, sat a man who was the antithesis of it all. His name was Liam Donovan, and he was a study in absolute stillness. He didn't belong here, and it was obvious to anyone who spared him a glance. While the fencers were coiled springs of kinetic energy, Liam was a block of granite. He sat on a simple wooden bench, his back perfectly straight, his hands resting lightly on his knees. He wore simple, dark-washed jeans, a plain charcoal gray t-shirt that fit his lean frame without being tight, and a pair of worn leather boots that seemed more suited for marching on pavement than standing on polished wood. He wasn't looking at his phone or reading a book. He was simply watching, his gaze calm and unfocused, taking in the entire room without lingering on any single detail. His presence was a low hum beneath the high-pitched symphony of the academy. Some of the younger students, teenagers with dreams of collegiate scholarships, occasionally glanced his way. They saw a man in his mid-30s with short, neat brown hair and a face that was handsome in a severe, almost sculpted way. It was a face that didn't offer easy smiles. They saw the quiet confidence in his posture but misinterpreted it as aloofness, or perhaps boredom. They couldn't know that Liam's stillness wasn't empty, it was full. It was a discipline honed over thousands of hours, in blistering heat and freezing rain, in a place where stillness was the highest form of respect. Liam was on a rare 3-day leave. A cousin's wedding had brought him to North Carolina, and that cousin's son was one of the students here. He'd promised to watch the boy practice, a simple request that had landed him in this alien environment. He felt a detached sense of admiration for the athletes. He recognized the discipline, the endless repetition required to make a complex motion seem effortless. He understood the language of muscle memory, the pursuit of a perfection that could never truly be attained. It was a different dialect of a language he knew fluently. The relative peace of the afternoon was shattered not by a sound, but by a presence. The main doors of the academy swung open, and Julian Vance strode in as if he owned the building. And in a way, he did. Julian was the Blade Point Academy's crowning achievement. A two-time national champion in épée, a contender for the next Olympic team, and the face of 3 different corporate sponsors. He was impossibly handsome, with a mane of blonde hair swept back from his forehead and a smile that was both charming and predatory. He moved with a liquid grace that made the other talented fencers look clumsy by comparison. He wasn't just an athlete, he was a star. A half-dozen younger fencers immediately stopped their drills, their attention snapping towards him like compass needles finding north. "Julian! You're back," one of them called out. Julian flashed his signature smile, a brilliant white against his tanned skin. "Couldn't stay away," he said, his voice smooth and confident, easily carrying across the large room. "Had to make sure you all weren't getting rusty without me." He unzipped a sleek, carbon fiber weapon case, revealing an Italian-made épée with a custom-molded pistol grip that probably cost more than Liam's monthly rent. He shed his expensive athletic jacket, revealing the perfectly toned physique of a professional athlete. He was a spectacle, and he knew it. He basked in the attention, his ego soaking it in like the sun. As he began a series of warm-up lunges, each one impossibly fast and precise, the energy in the room shifted. The storm had arrived, and it was loud, bright, and utterly sure of itself. And it was only a matter of time before that storm noticed the quiet, unmoving stone in the corner. Julian Vance didn't just warm up, he performed. He took to the main fencing strip, a raised platform in the center of the academy, and invited the facility's number 2 fencer for a light bout. The match was anything but light. It was a masterclass in domination. Julian's movements were a blur of white and silver. His footwork was so rapid it seemed like he was gliding on ice, his blade a flickering extension of his will. He scored touch after touch, the electronic scoring machine erupting in a triumphant shriek and a flash of green light for his side. He made it look effortless, even theatrical, adding a small flourish after a particularly impressive point, a flick of the wrist that was pure showmanship. The younger fencers watched, mesmerized. They hung on his every move, their faces a mixture of awe and envy. To them, Julian was a god of their sport, the physical embodiment of everything they aspired to be. After easily winning the bout 15-3, he pulled off his mask, his blonde hair perfectly damp, and offered a condescendingly gracious handshake to his opponent. "Good form, Kevin," Julian said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're getting faster. Just remember to control the endpoint. The blade is a paintbrush, not a club." He was in his element, the center of his universe, dispensing wisdom from on high. It was then, as his eyes swept across his domain, that he finally noticed Liam. He saw the man in the plain clothes, sitting perfectly still, his expression unreadable. In a room full of acolytes, Liam's neutrality stood out like a challenge. Julian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He couldn't stand being ignored. He sauntered over, his entourage of younger fencers trailing behind him like pilot fish. "Well, what do we have here?" Julian began, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. "A new member. I don't recognize the uniform." Liam's young cousin, a nervous 16-year-old named Sam, quickly stepped forward. No, Julian. That's my cousin, Liam. He's just visiting. He's in the army." Julian's eyes lit up with a particular kind of predatory interest. "The army? Really?" He circled Liam slowly, looking him up and down as if inspecting a piece of livestock. "Don't see many soldiers in here. What do you do? Infantry? Logistics?" "I'm with the 3rd Infantry Regiment," Liam said, his voice low and even, betraying no emotion. "I'm a sentinel at the tomb of the unknown soldier." A flicker of recognition, followed immediately by derision, crossed Julian's face. The younger fencers exchanged confused glances, then looked to Julian for their cue. "The tomb guard?" Julian chuckled, a rich, patronizing sound. "Oh, I've seen you guys on TV. With the shiny shoes and the rifles. Very precise." He drew the word out, making it sound like an insult. "All that slow-motion marching and rifle flipping. Is that what the army considers combat training these days? A sort of military ballet?" A few of the younger fencers snickered. The seed of mockery had been planted. "Bet he could stand still for hours, though," one of them chimed in, eager to please the champion. "That's a skill, right?" "Yeah, a skill for being a statue," another added, bolder now. "What's with that thing you guys do? 21 steps. How do you not fall asleep?" The insults were juvenile, but they stung the air nonetheless. Over by the coach's office, a man in his late 50s named Marcus Thorne looked up from his tablet. Marcus was the academy's founder and head coach, a man with a quiet intensity that commanded more respect than Julian's flash ever could. He had graying hair cropped short in a military style and the sharp, analytical eyes of a man who missed nothing. He was a former Army captain who had coached the U.S. military pentathlon team, a discipline that included fencing alongside shooting, swimming, running, and riding. He knew the difference between sport and survival. Something in Liam's unwavering calm set off a warning bell in his mind. He didn't intervene, but he crossed his arms and watched, his expression hardening. Julian, meanwhile, was warming to his subject. He was performing for his audience, and Liam was the perfect prop. Seriously, though, he continued, leaning in conspiratorially. All that ceremony. What's the point? In a real fight, speed is life. Hesitation is death. Everything you practice is slow, deliberate, predictable. On this strip, he gestured around the room with a sweep of his hand, you'd be a walking target. You'd be hit 10 times before you even finished your first step. He looked directly at Liam, expecting a reaction, anger, embarrassment, anything. But Liam simply met his gaze. His eyes were like the surface of a deep, still lake. There was no flicker of emotion. He just sat there, absorbing the insults as if they were a foreign language he didn't understand. And his silence, his absolute, unshakable calm, was more infuriating to Julian than any retort could have ever been. It was a silent, profound rejection of Julian's entire worldview. The champion's smile vanished, replaced by a tight, irritated line. He wasn't just performing anymore. Now, it was personal. Liam's silence was a vacuum, and Julian's ego rushed to fill it. The lack of a response was not a surrender, it was a dismissal. Julian, a man accustomed to being the center of every room, felt the attention of his small crowd beginning to waver. He saw the flicker of doubt in their eyes. Why wasn't this guy reacting? For his performance to work, his prop needed to play its part. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Julian pressed, his voice losing its smooth, playful edge and gaining a sharper, more aggressive tone. Or do they teach you not to speak unless you're given a direct order? Stand here. Walk there. Polish this rifle. He mimed the actions with exaggerated, mocking precision. It must be tough, playing soldier for the tourists. All that pomp and circumstance, pretending it's a real job. Each word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to belittle and provoke. Liam's gaze remained steady, but inside, a lifetime of discipline held the line. He had faced down colder threats than a preening athlete. He had stood his post through hurricanes, his uniform soaked, his resolve untouched. He had endured the raw, tearful grief of Gold Star mothers and the silent, stoic pain of old veterans at the tomb. The taunts of a boy with a sword were just noise, insignificant static against the profound silence he was sworn to protect. Marcus Thorne, the head coach, took a slow step out of his office, his presence a subtle shift in the room's gravity. He knew this type of arrogance well. He'd seen it in young, talented soldiers who hadn't yet learned the difference between confidence and hubris. And he recognized the look in Liam's eyes. It wasn't fear or weakness. It was control. The kind of control that is forged in crucibles far hotter than a fencing competition. Julian sensed his audience slipping away. He needed to escalate, to force a confrontation. He unzipped the side pocket of his gear bag and pulled out a second épée, a standard academy model. He held it out, not by the grip, but by the blade, offering the handle to Liam. You know what? I'm tired of talking, Julian announced, his voice booming with forced bravado. You're a soldier. This is a sword. It's simpler than a rifle. No moving parts. Let's see if any of that famous discipline translates. He tossed the sword, and it clattered onto the polished floor at Liam's feet. The metallic sound was sharp, ugly, and insulting. The entire academy went silent. The gentle hum of drills stopped. Every head turned. This was no longer just banter, it was a formal, public challenge. A gauntlet had been thrown. Liam's cousin, Sam, looked horrified. Liam, you don't have to, he whispered, his face pale. He's Julian Vance. As if the name itself was a weapon. Liam finally moved. He didn't look at Julian. His eyes went to the sword on the floor. He blinked once, slowly. Then he looked at his young cousin, and for the first time, a flicker of something registered on his face, not anger, but a deep, weary resolve. He had hoped to simply observe, to remain invisible. But an insult to him was an insult to the uniform he wore and the sentinels he served with. It was an insult to the very idea of his duty. He gave Sam a small, almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. Then, with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a man who had been so still, he stood up. He bent down, not in a rush, but with the same deliberate economy of motion he used for everything, and picked up the sword. He didn't brandish it. He held it loosely, pointing downward, as if it were a simple walking stick. He looked at Julian, his voice as calm and clear as it had been from the start. "One touch," he said. It wasn't a question or a negotiation. It was a statement of terms. A triumphant, predatory grin spread across Julian's face. He had him. He had finally gotten a reaction. "One touch," he agreed readily. "First to score a valid point wins. Let's not waste any more time." He strode back to the main strip, grabbing his mask and beckoning Liam forward. Liam didn't bother with a mask or a protective jacket. He simply walked to the opposite end of the strip, his worn boots making a soft, solid sound on the wood. He took his stance. It was not the classic, elegant en garde of a sport fencer. It was something else entirely. It was lower, more grounded, more solid. It was the stance of a rifleman with a bayonet, a posture designed not for scoring points, but for holding the line. It was the stance of a man prepared to meet a charge. The unspoken challenge had been answered. And the entire room held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The electronic scoring machine was activated, its low hum the only sound in the cavernous room. At opposite ends of the raised strip, the two men stood as perfect archetypes of their worlds. Julian was a vision of modern athleticism, clad in pristine white, his body a weapon honed for speed and aggression, his custom blade an extension of his ego. Liam was an anachronism, a man in street clothes holding a borrowed sword, his posture a throwback to an older, grimmer form of combat. He looked utterly out of place, yet completely centered. "Fencers, ready. Fence." Marcus Thorne's voice cut through the tension, the traditional command serving as the starting gun. Julian exploded into motion. He didn't waste a second, launching a blistering series of attacks. His blade became a silver blur, a dizzying display of feints, disengages, and lightning-fast lunges. His footwork was a frantic, aggressive dance, pushing forward, trying to overwhelm Liam with sheer speed and offensive pressure. He was the storm, throwing everything he had at the rock. And Liam was a rock. He barely moved. His feet, planted in those worn leather boots, seemed rooted to the floor. He didn't retreat under Julian's onslaught. He held his ground. His defense was a thing of shocking, brutal minimalism. Where Julian's blade was a whirlwind, Liam's was a single, immovable point in space. He didn't execute wide, sweeping parries. A slight rotation of his wrist, an almost imperceptible shift of his forearm, that was all. Each of Julian's furious attacks was met and deflected with an efficiency that was borderline insulting. It was as if a master architect was effortlessly correcting the flawed scribbles of a child. The initial confidence on Julian's face began to curdle into frustration, then into a dawning sliver of disbelief. He was throwing his entire arsenal at this man, and nothing was landing. The crowd of young fencers watched, their jaws slack. They had never seen Julian, their idol, so completely neutralized. They couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. Liam wasn't just defending, he was controlling the space, dictating the rhythm of the fight through his sheer lack of movement. Growing desperate, Julian abandoned finesse for raw aggression. He gathered himself and launched his signature move, a powerful, explosive flesh attack, a running charge designed to close the distance and score before the opponent could react. He became a human missile, his body low, his arm extended, his blade aimed squarely at Liam's chest. It was the opening Liam had been waiting for. In the face of the charge, he did not retreat. He did not parry. As Julian's blade hurtled towards him, Liam executed a single, perfect action. He took one short, precise step forward, not back, into the path of the attack. His own arm extended in a simple, straight line. There was no flourish, no wasted energy. It was the shortest distance between 2 points. It was a bayonet thrust. The timing was sublime. It was perfect. Julian's charge carried him directly onto Liam's waiting point. Before Julian's blade could even come close to its target, the tip of Liam's sword made contact with the center of his chest. Beep! A single, piercing electronic tone cut through the air. The green light on Liam's side of the pylon flashed on, stark and absolute. The duel was over. Julian froze mid-stride, his momentum dead, his expression a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. The point of Liam's blade was still resting gently on his chest. Liam had not moved an inch from his final position. And then came the silence. It was not an absence of noise. It was a presence. A heavy, crushing weight that fell over the entire academy. The snickering, the whispers, the arrogant boasts, all of it was annihilated, replaced by a profound, collective stillness that mirrored the man standing victorious on the strip. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. It was broken only by the quiet hum of the scoring machine, its single green light a stubborn, undeniable fact. Julian Vance, the champion, stood impaled on the tip of his opponent's blade, not by force, but by a chilling, impossible precision. He stumbled back a step, his own sword clattering from his nerveless fingers onto the strip. The sound was unnaturally loud in the dead quiet. His face, usually a canvas of supreme confidence, was now a wreck of confusion and humiliation. Liam retracted his arm with the same lack of ceremony he had shown throughout. He held the borrowed épée pointed at the floor, his posture unchanged, his breathing even. He looked at Julian, his expression not one of triumph or satisfaction, but of simple finality. The transaction was complete. The young fencers, Julian's chorus of admirers, stared with wide, disbelieving eyes. Their entire understanding of their sport had just been upended. Flash, speed, and aggression, the pillars of their idol's style, had just been rendered utterly useless by stillness, economy, and one perfect, simple motion. They looked from the defeated Julian to the silent man in street clothes, and for the first time, they saw him not as a target of ridicule, but as a terrifying enigma. It was Marcus Thorne who finally moved, stepping onto the edge of the strip. His voice was calm, but it carried the unmistakable weight of authority, cutting through the stunned silence and commanding the attention of every person in the room. "Do you see now?" he asked, his question directed at Julian but meant for everyone. "Do you understand what just happened?" Julian just shook his head, muttering, "I don't." He didn't even move. It was a lucky shot. Marcus let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Lucky?" he said, his voice laced with iron. "There was nothing lucky about that. You were defeated before you even began the charge. What you just witnessed was not sport. It was geometry. It was the grim, unforgiving mathematics of combat." He turned his gaze to the students. "All of you, you train for points. You learn to play a game with complex rules, feints, and elaborate setups. Your goal is to touch the opponent. His goal," Marcus nodded towards Liam, "is different. He comes from a world where the objective is to control the ground you stand on and neutralize a threat with absolute efficiency." He walked closer, his eyes locking with Julian's. "You mocked his ceremonial duty. You called his movements a slow-motion ballet. You are a fool. The sentinels at the tomb of the unknown soldier are not chosen for their ability to look good in a uniform. They are chosen from the most disciplined soldiers in the U.S. Army. They are subjected to a selection and training process that has a washout rate of over 90%. They are masters of detail, focus, and unwavering control." Marcus pointed at Liam. "That stance you laughed at? It's a fighting stance, designed to be immovable. Those 21 deliberate steps. Each one is measured to the inch, instilling a god-tier sense of distance and spatial awareness that becomes pure instinct. That's so-called rifle flipping. It's a weapons handling drill that builds a bond between man and tools so deep they become one." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The move he just used to beat you. That was not a fencing lunge. That was a bayonet thrust. It is designed to be the straightest, fastest, and most lethal line between 2 points. It is taught not for sport, but for survival. You were playing checkers, son. He was playing chess, and he put you in checkmate with his first move. The revelation washed over the room like a shockwave. The whispers started, no longer of mockery, but of awe. A bayonet thrust. One student breathed. Holy crap, whispered another. They looked at Liam with new eyes, seeing not a statue, but a weapon. A quiet, professional weapon that had been sitting among them all along. Julian's face went from pale to ashen. The foundation of his world, his speed, his talent, his superiority, had crumbled to dust. His expensive, custom sword lay on the floor, looking like a cheap toy. His arrogance had led him to challenge not just a man, but a discipline, a philosophy, and a tradition far deeper and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The silence in the room was no longer just shock. It was respect. A heavy, profound respect born from the sudden, terrifying understanding of what true mastery looked like. The atmosphere in the Blade Point Academy had been permanently altered. The easy arrogance was gone, replaced by a contemplative quiet. Shooters packed up their gear with less swagger, their conversations muted. They had come for a day of sport and posturing but had received a sobering lesson in humility. Liam walked back to his bench, placed the borrowed épée down gently, and picked up his simple thermos. He poured a cup of coffee, the familiar ritual grounding him after the unwelcome confrontation. The act was so normal, so mundane, it was almost surreal after the display of profound skill he'd just demonstrated. A few fencers began to drift over, their curiosity overriding their intimidation. They kept a respectful distance, drawn to him not as a champion, but as a source of knowledge they now desperately wanted to understand. Finally, Julian approached. His earlier swagger was completely gone, replaced by a hesitant, shuffling gait. His face was a mixture of shame and genuine confusion. He stopped a few feet from Liam's bench. "Look," he started, his voice low, almost a mumble. I was out of line. What I said about your duty, about the tomb, it was ignorant. I had no idea." Liam looked up from his coffee, his expression neutral. He wasn't gloating. There was no "I told you so" in his eyes. "You saw a uniform and made an assumption," he said simply. "It happens." It was a statement of fact, offered without anger or forgiveness. But, to do that, Julian gestured vaguely towards the fencing strip. To be a tomb guard. And to have that kind of skill. I don't understand. After a background like that, isn't guarding a monument a step down? Liam took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. His tone was patient, like a teacher explaining a fundamental concept. "You think it's a demotion. That's the first mistake," he said. "It's not a post you're assigned to. It's a privilege you have to earn. Most of us, we come from combat units. Rangers, infantry, Marines. We choose to be there. The ceremony, the part you see, is just the visible manifestation of the promise we make." "A promise?" Julian asked, his voice soft. "A promise to the unknowns," Liam clarified. "A promise that they are not forgotten. The discipline isn't for show. It's our way of honoring their sacrifice. Every step, every second of silence, has to be perfect, because they gave their perfection. They gave everything. Standing guard isn't a job. It's a mission. It's the same as any other mission, just, with more witnesses." Marcus Thorne, who had been listening from nearby, nodded grimly. "People see the pomp, but they don't understand the purpose. They don't realize that badge is one of the rarest and most difficult to earn in the military. You don't get it for looking good. You earn it by proving you are the kind of soldier who can be trusted, alone, with a weapon and the weight of our nation's history on your shoulders. The weight of that idea settled over the young fencers. The tomb guard wasn't a statue. He was a shield. He was the living embodiment of a sacred vow. Liam finished his coffee, rinsed the cup, and began packing his few things. He was shouldering his small bag when his young cousin, Sam, approached, his eyes shining with an emotion that went far beyond hero worship. "My dad was right," Sam said, his voice filled with awe. "He served in the 101st Airborne. He always told me the quietest guys in the room are the ones you have to watch out for. I never really got it until now." "Thank you, Liam." A rare, small smile touched the corner of Liam's mouth. "Your dad's a smart man," he said. "Just remember what you saw today. Respect isn't about what a person says or what they wear. It's about what they do, especially when no one's watching." He gave a polite nod to the room. "Gentlemen," he said, and turned to leave. As Liam walked out into the late afternoon sun, the sounds of the fencing academy started up again behind him, but they were different now. They were more focused, less ostentatious. A lesson had been learned. He got into his unassuming gray sedan and started the engine, heading for the highway. Tomorrow, he would be back in Arlington. He would don the immaculate blue uniform, pin on the silver badge he had bled for, and take his post. He would become still, a silent sentinel guarding the sleep of heroes, while the world bustled on around him. And no one watching would know that the man in the uniform, that a ceremonial statue, possessed a skill forged in the deadliest of fires, ready to be unleashed in a single, silent, perfect motion. The story you just heard is about more than a duel in a gym. It's about the quiet professionals who walk among us, the men and women whose incredible skill is hidden beneath a surface of humble duty. It's a reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. What does respect mean to you? Is it about loud achievements, or is it about the silent, unwavering commitment to a purpose greater than oneself? Let us know in the comments below. We believe in honoring these quiet heroes, so if this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Let's keep the conversation going, and always, comment with respect.